Have you ever discovered a secret so heartbreaking that it changed everything you believed about your family? 7 months pregnant and running from a devastating betrayal. Sarah's only hope was an abandoned cabin deep in the mountains. But hidden beneath its old wooden floor was a secret room that had been waiting for her for decades. What she found inside would uncover painful family secrets, reveal a truth no one was supposed to know, and force her to make the most important decision of her life. Don't skip this story, because the final revelation may change the way you think about love, family, and the sacrifices a mother is willing to make. Sometimes the people we trust the most are the ones who leave the deepest scars. Sarah Whitmore pressed both hands against her swollen belly as freezing rain hammered against the windshield of her old pickup truck. The narrow mountain road twisted through the Bitterroot Mountains of western Montana, disappearing into darkness each time lightning split the sky. At 34 years old and 7 months pregnant, Sarah had never felt more alone. Not because of the storm, because everything she believed about her life had fallen apart in less than 2 days. For years, Sarah told herself she was one of the fortunate ones. After losing both of her parents before she turned 10, she spent most of her childhood moving from one relative's home to another. She learned how to survive disappointment long before she learned how to trust people. She learned how to smile when her heart was breaking, how to pretend she was fine when she felt forgotten. And somehow, life eventually seemed to reward her patience. Or at least that's what she believed. 3 years earlier, Daniel Prescott had entered her life like an answer to every prayer she had whispered alone at night. He was successful, kind, patient, the owner of one of the largest ranches in Montana, the kind of man who remembered the little things, the kind of man who brought flowers for no reason, the kind of man who sat beside her through years of fertility treatments when doctors quietly warned that motherhood might never happen for her. When Sarah finally became pregnant, she thought she had received a miracle. Every evening she would sit in the nursery they had built together and imagine holding her baby for the first time. She imagined tiny fingers wrapping around hers. Bedtime stories, Christmas mornings, first steps across the living room floor. The simple moments that create a family. The kind of moments Sarah herself had rarely known. That dream carried her through months of morning sickness, sleepless nights, and constant worry. For the first time in her life, she felt safe. For the first time, she felt she belonged somewhere. But dreams can be fragile things. Sometimes they break slowly, and sometimes they shatter with a single discovery. For Sarah, everything began when she accidentally found a collection of financial documents hidden among files belonging to her husband's business. At first, the numbers seemed strange. Payments made to companies that didn't appear to exist. Millions of dollars moving between accounts with no clear purpose. Names appearing and disappearing like ghosts. Sarah wasn't a detective. She wasn't an investigator. But she was smart enough to know when something felt wrong. And the deeper she looked, the more frightened she became. The man she loved wasn't simply hiding money. He was hiding secrets. Dangerous secrets. Secrets powerful people would do anything to protect. A violent crack of thunder shook the truck. Sarah blinked away tears and glanced at the wedding ring on her finger. For a long moment she couldn't stop staring at it. The symbol of every promise Daniel had ever made. Every promise she had trusted. Every promise that now felt like a lie. Then suddenly, the engine sputtered. The truck lurched and died. Silence swallowed the lonely mountain road. Outside, rain poured from the sky in silver sheets. Sarah turned the key. Nothing. Again. Nothing. A knot of fear tightened inside her chest. She looked around. No houses. No lights. No traffic. Nothing but endless wilderness stretching into darkness. And somewhere behind her, people might already be looking for her. People who desperately wanted the information hidden inside her purse. people who would stop at nothing to get it back. The baby kicked suddenly beneath her ribs. A strong movement, a reminder that she wasn't alone. Sarah placed a trembling hand against her stomach. "It's okay, sweetheart," she whispered softly. But deep inside, she wasn't sure it was. For the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid for herself. She was afraid for her child, afraid she might not live long enough to protect the little life depending on her. Then, through the rain-covered windshield, she saw it. A faint light, barely visible through the storm. High on the mountainside, an old cabin standing alone among the trees. Hope. Small. Fragile. But enough. Sarah grabbed her coat, clutched her belly, and stepped out into the freezing rain. She had no way of knowing that the lonely cabin waiting in the darkness would uncover a secret buried for more than 30 years. A secret connected to her mother, her marriage, her unborn child, and a truth so shocking that it would force her to question every moment of her life. The storm above the mountains was only beginning. The real storm was waiting for her inside. The rain soaked through Sarah's coat within minutes. Cold water trickled down the back of her neck as she struggled up the muddy hillside, one hand wrapped around her belly, the other shielding her eyes from the storm. Every step felt heavier than the last. The baby shifted inside her. A small movement, a reminder of why she couldn't stop. Not now. Not when everything she loved was at stake. The faint light she'd spotted from the road flickered between the trees ahead. It wasn't much, but in a wilderness filled with darkness, it felt like salvation. By the time Sarah reached the cabin, she was shivering uncontrollably. The structure looked ancient. Weathered logs, a sagging roof, broken shutters hanging from rusted hinges. It looked abandoned decades ago. Yet somehow, a dim light glowed behind one of the dusty windows. Sarah climbed the porch steps carefully. The wood groaned beneath her weight. For a moment she hesitated. Every instinct told her not to go inside. But staying outside meant freezing. And she wasn't just responsible for herself anymore. She raised her hand and knocked. Nothing. Only the sound of rain pounding the roof. She waited. Knocked again. Still nothing? Finally. She wrapped her fingers around the old brass doorknob and pushed. The door creaked open. "Hello," she called. Her voice echoed through the empty cabin. No answer. The interior smelled of old wood and dust. A stone fireplace dominated one wall. A faded rocking chair sat beside it. The place looked frozen in time, as though someone had simply stood up one day and never returned. Sarah stepped inside and shut the door behind her. Immediately, the silence felt strange, almost unnatural. Outside, the storm raged like a living thing. Inside, everything was still. Too still. She moved cautiously through the cabin. A small kitchen, an old dining table, a bedroom with a rusted iron bed frame. Nothing unusual, nothing threatening, yet the uneasy feeling remained. Then she noticed something, a faint humming sound. At first she thought it was the wind, but it wasn't. This sound was steady, mechanical, modern, completely out of place. Sarah stopped moving, listened. The sound seemed to be coming from beneath the floor. A chill ran through her. The cabin looked as though it belonged in the 1940s. There shouldn't have been any electricity. There certainly shouldn't have been machinery running underneath it. The humming continued. Low, constant, like a heartbeat hidden beneath the mountain. Sarah's curiosity battled with her fear. Normally she would have left it alone, but nothing about her life was normal anymore. Not after the documents. Not after discovering the money trail. Not after realizing her husband had lied to her. The baby kicked again. Hard enough to make her wince. "It's okay," she whispered, though she wasn't sure whether she was comforting the baby or herself. The sound led her toward the center of the cabin. Near the fireplace, she knelt carefully. The wooden floorboards looked ordinary at first glance, until she noticed tiny scratches around one section, as though it had been opened many times, far more recently than the rest of the floor. Her pulse quickened. Slowly, she brushed away years of dust. A metal ring appeared, hidden perfectly between the boards. Sarah stared at it, her heart pounding louder than the storm. Someone had concealed this deliberately. For a long moment, she considered walking away, calling the police, finding help, doing anything except opening whatever lay beneath. Then she remembered Daniel, his lies, his secrets, the fear she'd seen in his eyes when he realized she had found those records. Whatever was hidden here might explain everything. Taking a deep breath, Sarah gripped the ring and pulled. The section of flooring lifted with surprising ease. A rush of cold air escaped from below, and beneath it, a steel ladder disappeared into darkness. Sarah's mouth went dry. This wasn't a storage cellar. This wasn't an old mining shaft. The walls below were reinforced steel. Modern, expensive, impossible. A secret facility hidden beneath a forgotten mountain cabin. The realization made her stomach tighten. Who built this? And why? Lightning flashed outside. For a brief moment, the cabin glowed white. Then darkness returned. Sarah looked toward the front door. She could still leave. She could pretend she never found any of this. But deep inside, she already knew that wasn't possible. Not anymore. The truth had been chasing her for days. Now she was standing at its doorway. Slowly, she climbed down the ladder. The deeper she descended, the warmer the air became. The humming grew louder, brighter, more alive. At the bottom, her feet touched polished concrete. Motion sensors clicked. Lights flickered on automatically, and Sarah froze. The room stretching before her shouldn't have existed. Not beneath an abandoned cabin. Not beneath a mountain. Rows of computer servers hummed quietly. Security monitors covered an entire wall. Steel vault doors gleamed beneath fluorescent lighting. Everything looked pristine. Maintained. Operational. As though someone had been here only hours ago. Her heart hammered. This wasn't a shelter. It wasn't a bunker. It was a secret. A very expensive secret. Then something else caught her attention. One of the monitors had activated automatically. Words appeared across the screen. Access recognized. Welcome back. Sarah Whitmore. The color drained from her face. For several seconds, she simply stared. Unable to breathe. Unable to think. The system knew her name. Not just her identity. Her exact name. As if it had been waiting for her. As if someone had expected her arrival. The baby moved again. This time Sarah felt genuine fear. Not fear of the storm. Not fear of Daniel. Something deeper. More primal. The feeling that her life was about to change forever. Then another screen flickered on. Followed by another. And another. Video files began appearing across the monitors. Hundreds of them. Years of recordings. Dates stretching back decades. One particular file caught her attention. Its timestamp was recent, only a few months old. Her hand trembled as she reached towards the keyboard. Every instinct warned her to stop, to walk away, to run. But she couldn't, because somewhere inside her heart, Sarah already knew. Whatever answers she had been searching for, they were waiting inside those files. And once she pressed play, there would be no going back. Sarah's finger hovered over the keyboard. For a long moment, she couldn't bring herself to move. Some truths change everything. Once you know them, there is no pretending you never did. Outside, thunder rolled across the mountains, the sound muffled by layers of reinforced concrete above her head. The underground chamber remained perfectly calm, as though it existed in a different world. Finally, she clicked the first video. Static flashed across the monitor before the image sharpened. The room on the screen looked exactly like the one she was standing in now. Nothing had changed. The same polished floor, the same rows of computer servers, the same vault door. Only the date in the corner told a different story. 23 years earlier. Sarah leaned closer. At first, no one appeared. Then a woman stepped into view. She was carrying a leather folder tucked beneath one arm. Dark hair, gentle eyes, a familiar smile. Sarah's heart stopped. No. The whisper escaped before she realized she had spoken. It couldn't be. The woman walking confidently through the underground facility was her mother, Helen Whitmore, the woman Sarah had buried when she was only 9 years old. Sarah remembered the funeral. The tiny white flowers, the black umbrella her aunt had held over both of them, the closed casket everyone said she must never open. She remembered crying until she could barely breathe, remembered asking over and over why God had taken her mother away. And now, here she was, alive, walking through this hidden place as though she belonged there. Sarah stumbled backward until the back of her legs struck a chair. She collapsed into it, unable to look away. The recording continued. Her mother approached one of the computer terminals and placed her hand on a biometric scanner. The machine flashed green. Access granted. Exactly as it had moments earlier for Sarah. The realization sent a chill through her entire body. This wasn't coincidence. This place knew her mother. And somehow, it knew her too. The baby kicked sharply beneath her ribs. Sarah instinctively wrapped both arms around her stomach. "It's okay," she whispered, tears filling her eyes, although nothing felt okay anymore. She quickly searched through the archive. Hundreds of recordings. Different years. Different dates. Again and again, her mother appeared, sometimes carrying files, sometimes reviewing financial records, sometimes speaking with people whose faces remained hidden from the cameras. One recording was dated only 6 months earlier. Sarah's breathing became shallow. That wasn't possible. According to every official record, her mother had been dead for 25 years. With trembling fingers, she opened the newest file. The camera zoomed toward the main entrance. Her mother looked older now. Silver strands lined her dark hair. Small wrinkles framed her eyes. But there was no mistaking her. Before leaving the room, Helen stopped. She turned toward the camera. For several silent seconds, she simply stared into the lens. Then she smiled. It wasn't the smile Sarah remembered from childhood. It carried sadness, regret, and something else. Hope. Her lips moved slowly. The audio crackled with heavy interference. Most of the words were impossible to understand. Only a few broken fragments reached the speakers. "Eh!" If she finds this. Koke, tell her. I'm sorry. The recording ended. Sarah broke. She buried her face in both hands as sobs shook her shoulders. For 25 years, she had mourned a woman who might never have abandoned her at all. For 25 years, she had believed she was unwanted. That life had simply stolen everyone she ever loved. But what if none of that had been true? What if someone had stolen her mother instead? The questions crashed through her mind faster than she could answer them. Why had everyone lied? Who arranged the funeral? Who signed the death certificate? Who had raised her after that? Were they all part of the same secret? A soft electronic tone interrupted her thoughts. Another file had appeared automatically. Unlike the others, this one was protected. A message flashed across the screen. Authorized successor detected. Private message available. Sarah's heartbeat echoed in her ears. The system wasn't reacting randomly. It had recognized her. Not simply as a visitor, as someone's successor. She selected the file. This time the image appeared instantly. Her mother sat alone inside the same underground room. No movement. No distractions. Just her looking directly into the camera. As though she knew exactly who would one day watch this recording. Her eyes looked tired, She had aged far beyond the woman Sarah remembered, yet the warmth in them remained unchanged. She smiled softly. "If you're watching this—" She paused, taking a slow breath. "Oh, then I wasn't able to come back for you." Sarah's entire body froze. Another tear rolled down her cheek. "I need you to know something before you believe anything anyone tells you. I never abandoned you. Not for a single day. There wasn't a morning I didn't think about you. There wasn't a birthday I forgot. There wasn't a Christmas when I didn't wonder if you were warm, if you were safe, if someone was reading you bedtime stories the way I used to." Sarah could barely breathe. The room around her disappeared. For a moment she was 9 years old again, curled beneath a blanket, listening to her mother read stories before bed. Feeling safe, feeling loved. Then her mother's expression grew serious. "If you found this place, so was worth messaging." Or it means they've already found you. Sarah's stomach tightened. The baby shifted again. Helen leaned closer to the camera. "They'll convince you that everything happened by chance. They'll tell you your marriage was fate. They'll tell you your pregnancy is a miracle. Don't believe them. Nothing about your life has been accidental." Sarah's blood turned cold. Her marriage, her baby. How could her mother know? Helen's eyes filled with tears. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I tried to stop them. I tried for almost 30 years. But I ran out of time." Another pause. Then words Sarah would never forget. "If you're still carrying your baby..." Whatever happens next. "Mom, protect that child. Protect your baby, no matter what it costs." The screen suddenly went black. Silence returned. Sarah remained motionless. One hand rested protectively across her stomach. The other covered her mouth to keep herself from crying out loud. Nothing in her life would ever be the same again, because the woman she had mourned for 25 years had just spoken to her. And somehow, she already knew about the child growing inside her. Above the chamber, a faint vibration echoed through the ceiling. Then another. Heavy, rhythmic, like vehicles climbing the mountain road. Sarah slowly looked towards the security monitors. One by one, the cameras outside the cabin flickered to life. Headlights pierced the rain. 3 black SUVs emerged from the darkness. They stopped in front of the cabin. Car doors opened. Several figures stepped into the storm. One of them looked painfully familiar. Even through the rain, Sarah recognized her husband's silhouette. Daniel had found her, and this time, he hadn't come to bring her home. The headlights outside painted long, trembling beams across the security monitors. Sarah couldn't take her eyes off the screen. 3 black SUVs. 6 men, 1 woman, and standing in the middle of them all was Daniel. Rain poured over his dark coat, yet he stood perfectly still, as if the storm itself had no power over him. He wasn't searching. He wasn't worried. He knew exactly where she was. A cold realization settled deep inside Sarah's chest. He hadn't followed her because he loved her. He had followed her because he couldn't allow her to disappear. The little world she had built over the past 3 years began crumbling piece by piece. She remembered the afternoon Daniel first walked into the small community bank where she worked as an accountant. He had smiled so warmly, asked if she'd recommend a local coffee shop, returned the next day simply to thank her. Then the day after that, and the day after that. At the time, it had felt romantic. Now it felt rehearsed, almost scripted. Sarah slowly lowered herself into the chair in front of the monitors. The baby's gentle movement beneath her ribs reminded her to breathe. For the first time since discovering the hidden facility, she wasn't thinking about the money, or the underground bunker, or even her mother's impossible message. She was thinking about every memory she had ever shared with Daniel. Their first date, the first bouquet of wildflowers, The proposal beside Flathead Lake. The tears in his eyes when she said yes. The nursery they painted together. Every memory that once warmed her heart now carried a different meaning. Had any of it been real? Or had someone simply learned exactly what a lonely woman wanted to hear? Another memory surfaced. One she had never questioned before. Nearly 2 years ago, after another failed fertility treatment, Sarah had fallen into one of the darkest periods of her life. She had cried herself to sleep almost every night. She had even suggested they stop trying. Daniel had refused. "We'll never give up," he had whispered while holding her. "I know you're meant to be a mother." At the time, those words had saved her. Now they haunted her. Why had he been so determined? Why had he insisted they continue? Why had he always seemed strangely calm whenever doctors changed medications or recommended new treatments? Sarah's breathing became uneven. Then another memory arrived. The prenatal vitamins? Daniel had never forgotten them. Not once. Every single evening, he would hand her the bottle with a smile. "You have to take care of our little miracle." She had thought it was love. Now. She wasn't sure. Her eyes drifted toward the video her mother had recorded. "Nothing about your life has been accidental." The sentence echoed through her mind again and again. Nothing. Not the marriage. Not the pregnancy. Nothing. Sarah suddenly understood why her mother had apologized. Not because she had abandoned her, because she had never been able to protect her. Tears rolled silently down Sarah's cheeks. For 34 years, she had blamed herself for being unwanted. She had believed she simply wasn't worth staying for. But perhaps her mother had been fighting every single day just to keep her alive. That thought shattered something inside her. She covered her face and wept quietly. Not for the woman she had lost, but for all the years they had been stolen from each other. For every birthday spent wondering why her mother never came. For every Christmas she secretly hoped someone would knock on the door. For every lonely night she convinced herself she simply wasn't lovable enough. Outside, another SUV door slammed. The sound echoed through the cabin above. Sarah wiped her tears and looked back at the security monitors. Daniel wasn't shouting. He wasn't angry. He stood calmly beneath the rain, speaking into a small radio clipped beneath his jacket. The men surrounding the cabin moved with military precision. 2 covered the rear entrance. 2 positioned themselves beside the windows. Another disappeared into the tree line. This wasn't a husband searching for his frightened wife. It was an operation. Professional, disciplined, planned long before tonight. Her heart sank even deeper. Even the way Daniel smiled. Had that been part of the operation too? Sarah thought back to every argument they had ever had. Curiously, Daniel had never really lost his temper. He had never shouted. Never thrown anything? Never acted impulsively. At the time, she had admired his patience. Now she saw something different. Control. Someone who never lost control because every situation had already been anticipated. Every conversation already rehearsed. Every emotion carefully measured. The baby suddenly kicked harder than before. Sarah instinctively placed both hands across her belly. "I'm here," she whispered through trembling lips. "I'm still here?" The words weren't only for the child. They were for herself, because somewhere beneath the fear, beneath the betrayal, beneath the grief, a new feeling was quietly taking shape. Resolve. For years, Sarah had spent her life waiting for someone to rescue her. First her parents, then relatives, then Daniel. She had always believed safety came from trusting the right person. Now she realized something heartbreaking. No one was coming to save her. Not this time. If she wanted her child to have a future, if she wanted her mother's sacrifice to mean something, she would have to become the person she had spent her entire life waiting for. Outside, Daniel finally stepped onto the porch. A slow, deliberate knock echoed through the cabin above. 1, 2, 3. His calm voice drifted through the storm. "Sarah, I know you're in there. You don't have to do this alone." Months ago, those words would have brought her comfort. Tonight, they sounded like the beginning of a nightmare. Sarah slowly stood, wiping the last traces of tears from her face. She looked once more at the message her mother had left behind. Then she rested both hands gently on her belly. "No," she whispered with quiet determination. "I'm not alone anymore." For the first time in her life, Sarah wasn't running toward someone she hoped would protect her. She was preparing to protect someone else. And in that single moment, the frightened woman who had climbed the mountain disappeared forever. A mother was born. The knocking stopped. Silence settled over the cabin once again. Not the peaceful silence Sarah had known on quiet winter evenings back home. This silence carried weight, the kind that comes just before lives are changed forever. She stood motionless beneath the glow of the security monitors, every muscle in her body tense. Then Daniel spoke again. His voice drifted through the hidden microphones above. Soft, patient, almost affectionate. "Sarah, sweetheart, I know you're scared. I know you've seen things you don't understand. But I can explain everything." Sarah closed her eyes. How many times had that voice comforted her? How many nights had she fallen asleep believing that voice would always protect her? Now every word sounded carefully rehearsed. Outside, rain continued falling against the old cabin roof. Inside the underground chamber, the computers hummed quietly, indifferent to the heartbreak unfolding beneath them. Then, another monitor suddenly came to life. Not one Sarah had touched. The screen flickered once, twice, before displaying a single line of text. "Secondary access authorized." Sarah frowned. She hadn't touched the keyboard. Another message appeared. "Please proceed to Archive Room B." Her pulse quickened. Archive Room B. She hadn't noticed another room before. The wall beside the main computer emitted a soft mechanical click. A section of steel quietly slid open. Behind it stretched a narrow hallway illuminated by dim floor lights. Sarah hesitated. Every instinct warned her this could be another trap. Yet something deep inside told her otherwise. The hallway hadn't opened when Daniel arrived. It had opened after her mother's message, as though someone, or something, had been waiting for that exact moment. Carefully, Sarah stepped inside. The corridor wasn't long, only 30 feet or so, but every step felt strangely familiar, almost comforting. At the end stood another steel door. Unlike the massive vault entrance, this one looked almost ordinary. A small biometric scanner rested beside the handle. Sarah placed her trembling hand against it. A gentle chime echoed through the room. "Access confirmed." "Welcome home, Sarah?" Her breath caught. "Welcome home." No one had spoken those words to her in years. Not since she was a little girl. The door slid open. Sarah stepped inside. "Chimomom, saombe kwukso, nantomathoran," and immediately burst into tears. It wasn't another laboratory. It wasn't filled with computers, or gold, or surveillance equipment. It was a bedroom. A simple bedroom. Small, warm, peaceful. A handmade quilt covered a neatly made bed. Children's storybooks rested on wooden shelves. A faded rocking horse stood quietly in one corner. Family photographs decorated the walls. Sarah walked forward slowly. Her knees felt weak. One photograph stopped her cold. A little girl, no older than 5, laughing in a field of wildflowers, held tightly in her mother's arms. Sarah. It was her. She had never seen this picture before. With trembling fingers, she picked it up. On the back, written in faded blue ink, were 6 simple words. "My favorite day with my sunshine." The handwriting belonged to her mother. Fresh tears rolled down Sarah's face. She hadn't imagined those memories. The laughter, the bedtime stories, the warm hugs. They had been real. Her mother had loved her. Always. A soft click interrupted her thoughts. Another drawer unlocked automatically. Inside rested dozens of journals, each carefully labeled, year by year, everyone written in Helen Whitmore's handwriting. Sarah opened the first notebook. The very first page made her heart ache. Today, Sarah turned 6. I watched her from across the street after school. She smiled when another little girl shared her lunch. She still has the same laugh. I wanted to run to her. Instead, I walked away. Sarah covered her mouth. Another page. Sarah lost her first tooth today. She looked frightened. I almost broke cover to comfort her. But if they saw me, she'd never be safe again. Another. Today, Sarah graduated from college. She looked beautiful. I've never been prouder. One day I pray she'll understand why I couldn't hold her. The tears became impossible to stop. For years, Sarah had believed she had been forgotten. Instead, her mother had watched every important moment from a distance. Every birthday, every graduation, every heartbreak. Always close enough to see, never allowed to come near. Suddenly, Sarah no longer felt like an abandoned child. She felt like the daughter of the bravest woman she had ever known. The final journal rested alone at the bottom of the drawer. Unlike the others, its cover carried a small note. Open only when they find you. Sarah slowly lifted it. Inside was a sealed envelope addressed in familiar handwriting. For my daughter. Her hands trembled as she unfolded the letter. My dearest Sarah, if you're reading this, then everything I feared has finally happened. They've reached you. I wish I could be there to hold you one last time. But if I cannot, then listen carefully. Your greatest strength has never been your intelligence. It has never been your courage. It has always been your heart. That is the one thing they could never program, never manipulate, never steal. They will convince you that you're only part of their plan. Do not believe them. The moment you choose love over fear, their plan begins to fail. Sarah's vision blurred. She instinctively placed one hand over her stomach. The baby moved gently beneath her palm. Not with fear, but with quiet reassurance, almost as if the little life inside her recognized every word. Another sentence waited at the bottom of the page. You're not running anymore, sweetheart. You're walking toward the woman you were always meant to become. At that exact moment, a new alarm echoed through the underground facility. Not loud. Not panicked. Calm. Deliberate. Another monitor activated beside the bookshelf. Security footage filled the screen. Daniel had entered the cabin. He wasn't alone, but someone else had arrived as well. An elderly woman stepped out of a dark SUV parked several yards away. Silver hair, a weathered face, kind eyes that somehow felt familiar. The moment Sarah saw her, she recognized the woman from one of the old surveillance videos her mother had recorded years before. The woman looked directly toward one of the hidden cameras. Then she spoke 4 words that froze Sarah where she stood. Tell Sarah I'm here. For the first time that terrifying night, hope didn't feel like a memory. It felt real. Someone had finally come, not to capture her, but to finish the promise her mother had begun decades earlier. And for the first time since the nightmare began, Sarah realized she might not have to face the darkness alone after all. Sarah stood frozen, her mother's letter still trembling in her hands. The moment you choose love over fear, their plan begins to fail. The words echoed through her heart. For years, fear had quietly ruled every chapter of her life. Fear of being abandoned, fear of not being enough, fear of never becoming a mother, fear of losing the people she loved. Every decision she had ever made had somehow been shaped by that fear. Now she finally understood. Fear had been the chains, and someone had spent decades making sure she never realized she was wearing them. Outside, the security cameras showed Daniel slowly moving through the cabin above. His flashlight swept across the old wooden floor, inch by inch, methodical and patient. He wasn't searching anymore. He already knew where she was. He was simply waiting for her to come back. Sarah looked toward the hidden staircase. Only a few feet separated her from the man she had once believed would grow old beside her. The realization no longer filled her with heartbreak. Instead, it filled her with clarity. The tears had stopped, not because the pain had disappeared, but because something stronger had quietly taken its place. Purpose! The baby stretched gently beneath her ribs. Sarah smiled through damp eyes. "You've been stronger than me all along," she whispered. "I just didn't know it." For months she had believed she was protecting her child. Now she realized her child had been protecting her. Every tiny heartbeat had reminded her to keep moving. Every gentle kick had given her another reason to survive. For the first time in years, Sarah no longer saw herself as a victim. She saw herself as a mother, and mothers endured things they never imagined possible. She folded her mother's letter carefully and slipped it inside her coat, close to her heart. "I'm taking you with me," she whispered softly. "Both of you." One in her heart, one beneath it. A faint sound came from behind. The elderly woman from the security camera stepped quietly into the archive room. She had somehow reached the underground facility without making a sound. Up close, she looked nearly 70. Her silver hair was tied neatly behind her head. Her face carried the gentle lines of someone who had spent a lifetime worrying about other people. For several moments, neither woman spoke. The older woman simply looked at Sarah, then at the curve of her pregnant belly. Tears immediately filled her eyes. "You have her smile," she whispered. Sarah knew exactly who she meant. "My mother—" The woman nodded. "I promised Helen that if she couldn't reach you— Oh, I would—" Sarah searched the stranger's face. "So everything she told me—" "It's true." The woman lowered her eyes. "Every word." Sarah took a slow breath. "Then tell me one thing. Why destroy an innocent little girl's life?" The woman's expression broke. "They didn't choose you because you were weak. They chose you because you were kind. They believed kindness could be manipulated. They believed loneliness would make you trust anyone who offered love." She paused. "They underestimated one thing." Sarah waited. "A mother's heart?" Silence filled the room again. For the first time, Sarah understood something her mother had tried to tell her without saying it directly. Love wasn't her weakness. It never had been. It was the one thing none of them could control. The older woman reached into her coat and removed a small brass key attached to a faded blue ribbon. "Helen asked me to give you this when you were finally ready." Sarah accepted it carefully. "What does it open?" "Not a door. A choice." Confused, Sarah followed as the woman walked toward another wall hidden behind shelves of journals. She inserted the key into an old lock. A narrow compartment opened silently. Inside rested a small wooden box. Nothing more. No gold. No weapons. No classified files. Just a box worn smooth with age. Sarah opened it. Inside lay a faded baby blanket, a tiny knitted sweater, a silver rattle, and a stack of handwritten letters. The blanket smelled faintly of lavender. She instinctively held it against her face. Fresh tears filled her eyes. "My mother kept these. She made them herself." The older woman smiled. "Every winter. She never stopped believing she'd hold your baby one day." Sarah's knees nearly gave way. For decades, her mother had continued knitting for grandchildren she might never meet, never giving up hope, never allowing herself to stop loving the daughter she'd been forced to leave behind. Sarah gently wrapped the blanket around her shoulders. It felt like a hug reaching across 30 years. For the first time since this nightmare began, she no longer felt alone. She carried 3 generations of women with her now. A grandmother she barely remembered. A mother who had sacrificed everything, and a daughter, still waiting to be born. Outside, another voice echoed through the cabin. "Daniel." "Sarah." His tone remained calm. "We're running out of time." She listened, then quietly smiled. Something had changed. A few hours earlier, his voice would have made her run toward him. Now, it no longer held any power. She wasn't the frightened woman who had climbed the mountain in search of shelter. She wasn't the lonely little girl who spent years wondering why nobody stayed. She wasn't even the broken wife mourning the marriage she thought she'd lost. That woman had disappeared the moment she discovered her mother's love had never died. Sarah stood taller than she had all night. One hand rested over the baby blanket. The other gently covered her unborn child. "I'm ready," she said quietly. The elderly woman looked at her. "But for what?" Sarah's eyes no longer carried fear, only determination. "To stop surviving." A gentle smile touched her lips. "And finally, to start protecting." At that moment, she understood the greatest truth of her entire life. Courage isn't born when fear disappears. It is born the moment someone else's life becomes more important than your own. And from that moment forward, Sarah Whitmore was no longer running from her past. She was walking toward her future. The old woman looked into Sarah's eyes for a long moment. Then she smiled. Not the smile of someone who believed the battle was over, but the smile of someone who finally believed hope had survived. "You remind me so much of your mother," she whispered. Sarah lowered her eyes to the faded baby blanket wrapped around her shoulders. For the first time in her life, she understood what true inheritance looked like. It wasn't money. It wasn't land. It wasn't power. It was sacrifice. It was love passed quietly from one generation to the next. Outside, another knock echoed through the cabin. This time, Daniel's voice carried something new. Not confidence, desperation. "Sarah." "Please." "We don't have much time." She walked slowly toward one of the security monitors. The man standing in the rain looked exhausted. His shoulders, once so straight and proud, now seemed heavy beneath the weight of everything he had hidden. For a brief moment, Sarah remembered the man she had fallen in love with. The man who laughed with her while painting the nursery walls. The man who rubbed her swollen feet after long days. The man who whispered goodnight to the baby every evening before they went to sleep. Were those moments real? Or had they simply been part of another carefully written plan? She realized something unexpected. The answer no longer mattered. Because whether those moments were real for him, they had been real for her. Love had changed her, even if it had begun with deception, and no one could ever take away the woman she had become because of it. The elderly woman stepped beside her. "What are you thinking?" Sarah watched Daniel standing alone beneath the rain. "I think—" She paused. "Mom, I finally understand something my mother knew." The woman waited quietly. "You can't build a future by living inside hatred." For weeks, Sarah had imagined confronting Daniel, demanding answers, making him suffer as deeply as she had suffered. But standing there now, she felt none of that. Only sadness. Sadness for a man who had spent his life serving people who had never truly loved him. Sadness for someone who had confused obedience with purpose. He had stolen years from her life, but she refused to let him steal the years she still had left. The old woman gently touched Sarah's shoulder. "Helen hoped you'd say that." Sarah smiled through fresh tears. "My mother forgave people who didn't deserve it. Not because they earned forgiveness, but because she refused to let hatred become the last chapter of her story." Outside, Daniel slowly lowered his head, almost as though he somehow sensed the conversation happening beneath his feet. Sarah picked up the final journal her mother had written. Inside the last page was one short sentence. "If love survives, then I have already won." She traced the words with trembling fingers, then carefully closed the journal. The years of loneliness, the unanswered questions, the nights spent wondering why her mother never came back. None of those wounds would ever disappear completely. But they no longer controlled her. Some scars never leave. They simply stop hurting. Another movement came from inside her belly. This one stronger than any before. Sarah laughed softly through her tears. "You're impatient already." The baby responded with another gentle kick. The elderly woman smiled. "Your daughter knows your voice." Sarah rested both hands over her stomach. "My little girl, I don't know what kind of world you'll grow up in. I can't promise you'll never know heartbreak. I can't promise life will always be fair. But I can promise you one thing. No one will ever make you question whether you're loved." The room fell silent. Only the steady humming of the underground facility remained. Sarah suddenly realized the fear that had followed her all night was gone. Not because the danger had disappeared. Daniel was still upstairs. The people behind him were still searching. Tomorrow would bring questions she couldn't yet answer. But fear no longer owned her heart. Hope did. She carefully folded her mother's letter and placed it beside the tiny baby blanket inside her coat. 2 generations. 1 promise. She looked toward the staircase leading back to the world above. "I'm ready." The elderly woman nodded. "So am I." Together, they started walking. Not toward revenge, not toward anger, but toward the truth. Because truth, Sarah finally understood, was never meant to destroy people. It was meant to set them free. As they reached the bottom of the stairs, Sarah paused one last time. She looked back at the small bedroom her mother had secretly kept for decades, at the rocking horse, the photographs, the journals filled with love that distance had never erased. Then she whispered into the quiet room, "I spent half my life believing you left me." A tear slipped down her cheek. "But now I know. You were finding your way back to me every single day." She smiled. Not the smile of someone whose pain had ended, but the smile of someone who had finally found peace. Outside, dawn was beginning to break beyond the mountains. The storm clouds slowly drifted apart. Golden light stretched across the valley for the first time in days. Sarah took a deep breath. Every sunrise marks the end of one night, but it also marks the beginning of another life. She stepped forward with one hand resting over the daughter she had not yet met, and the other carrying the love of the mother she had finally found again. She had climbed the mountain believing she was running for her life. She walked back down knowing she had found her purpose. And sometimes, that is the greatest miracle of all. Life has a way of teaching us that the greatest battles are often the ones no one else can see. Sarah spent most of her life believing she had been abandoned, forgotten, and left to face the world alone. She allowed those painful beliefs to shape the woman she became. But when the truth finally came to light, she discovered that love had been surrounding her all along, even when it was forced to remain hidden. Sometimes the people we love cannot protect us in the ways we expect. Sometimes their greatest act of love is the sacrifice we never see. Sarah also learned that fear is a powerful prison. It convinces us that we are too weak, too broken, or too alone to change our future. But the moment she chose to protect someone else instead of protecting herself, fear lost its power over her. Her greatest strength was never intelligence, wealth, or courage. It was compassion. It was forgiveness. It was the unconditional love of a mother. In the end, Sarah didn't become extraordinary because she uncovered a terrible secret. She became extraordinary because she refused to let that secret define who she was. No matter what life has taken from you, no matter how many disappointments you've endured, you still have the power to choose love over bitterness, hope over despair, and courage over fear. Because our past may explain who we are, but it never has the final word on who we choose to become. Real-life application. Every family carries untold stories. Some are filled with joy, others with heartbreak, sacrifice, and unanswered questions. As we grow older, we often realize that our parents were fighting battles we never knew existed. They made mistakes, carried impossible burdens, and loved us in ways we may not have understood until much later. Before judging someone you love, try to understand the story they never had the chance to tell. Cherish the people who stand beside you today. Forgive when your heart is ready, and never miss an opportunity to tell your children or the people you love how much they mean to you. Because years from now, they may not remember every gift you gave them, but they will always remember how deeply you made them feel loved. Call to action. If Sarah's journey touched your heart, take a moment today to call someone you love. Tell them what they mean to you while you still have the chance. And if this story reminded you that hope can survive even the darkest nights, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who may need a little encouragement today. You never know whose heart might be healed by a single story.